In Canada, winter teaches houses how to keep secrets. They learn it from the cold, from the way snow seals sound and ice steals the earth. They learn it from the long nights when the dark presses its ear to the windows and listens, patient, forgiving nothing. Houses in Canada are not merely shelters, they are witnesses. The house on Elder Creek Road, just outside the town of Greyhaven, had been listening for a long time. It was a narrow, two-story place with cedar siding turned the color of old bone, built decades ago by a man who believed in straight lines and deep basements. The land around it sloped gently toward a stand of black spruce and then down to a creek that froze solid every winter, a white scar in the landscape. From the road, the house looked ordinary, even lonely. No one driving past would imagine that something beneath its floors was still warm with memory. Lena Markovic moved into the house in early October when the maples were already bleeding red into the ditches and the air smelled like metal. She arrived with a rented truck, a mattress tied badly with rope, and a boyfriend who smiled too much at strangers. Even Cole waved at the neighbors as they unloaded boxes. He was tall, broad shouldered, his beard still patchy in places like a boy's. He had grown up in Ontario and spoke with the soft confidence of someone who had never needed to leave. Lena, born in Vancouver to immigrant parents, spoke less. She watched. The house belonged to her aunt, who had died the previous winter, alone in her bed. No one had noticed for days. Lena never said what she thought about that. This place has good bones, Ivan said, stomping snow from his boots on the porch, even though it had not snowed yet. He laughed at his own joke. Solid, quiet. We could stay here a long time. Lena nodded. Quiet mattered. Inside the house smelled like dust and pine cleaner. The floors creaked in specific places like a chord. The basement door was at the end of the kitchen, narrow and steep, leading down into darkness. Lena stood there longer than necessary on their first night, listening to the hum of the furnace below. Creepy, Evan said, coming up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist. Bet it's freezing down there. Everything freezes eventually, Lena replied. He kissed her neck and did not hear the way her voice went flat. They settled into a routine as the days shortened. Evan took a job at the mill in town, leaving before dawn and coming back with sawdust in his hair. Lena worked from home doing transcription work for a Vancouver firm. Her laptop set up in the small front room that looked out onto the road. She watched cars passes. She watched snow clouds gather. She watched even too. At first, the arguments were small: who forgot to buy milk, why the heat was too high, why Lena never wanted to go out, never wanted to meet Ivan's friend in town. He called her distant. She called him loud. You don't talk to me, he said one night, standing in the kitchen with a beer in his hand. Outside, the first real snow of the season fell thick and silent. I talk, Lena said, typing. You don't listen. He laughed sharp. Jesus, Lena, you are always like this, like you are somewhere else. She looked up at him then. Maybe I am. The beer bottle shattered against the sink when he threw it, foam and glass exploding across the counter. He stared at his own hand, shocked, as if had acted without him. See, he said, his voice suddenly soft. You make me do that. Lena cleaned up the glass without a word. She cut her finger and did not react. Winter closed in around the house, heavy and complete. The creek froze. The road emptied. The nearest neighbor was a kilometer away, and the snowbanks between them grew tall and hard as walls. The house became its own world. Ivan's temper grew worse as the days grew shorter. He drank more. He complained about the cold, the town, the house. He complained about Lena's silences, about the way she flinched when he raised his voice. You think you are better than me? He said once, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. You think you are smarter? Lena met his eyes. Let go. He did, almost ashamed, but the mark stayed. She watched it bloom purple and yellow against her pale skin. The basement called to her after that. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. It was a sense of depth, of something waiting. The stairs creaked under her feet as she went down one afternoon while Evan was at work. The air was colder there, damp, smelling of dust and rust. The furnace thudded softly in the corner like a sleeping animal. The floor was poured concrete, cracked in places. Old shelves lined the walls, holding jars of nails, rusted tools, a box of her aunt's things no one had bothered to sort. At the far end was a low crawl space door, barely noticeable, its handle stiff with age. Lena knelt and pulled it open. Beyond was darkness and packed dirt. The house had been built partly over earth, not fully finished. She shone her phone light inside, illuminating rough beams and soil packed hard and cold. She felt something like relief. That night, Evan came home drunk and angry. The mill had laid off 2 men. He slammed doors. He accused her of not caring. You would be happy if I disappeared, he said, standing too close, his breath sore. Lena thought of the crawl space, of the cold, waiting earth. I need you to leave, she said quietly. He laughed. Then he shoved her. She fell. hitting the edge of the table, pain exploding through her side. Something inside her snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like ice breaking underfoot. When she stood, she was calm, even kept talking. He did not notice her pick up the hammer from the counter, where it had been left after a small repair that morning. He didn't notice until it struck his temple with a sound like wet wood splitting. He went down hard, surprise frozen on his face. Blood spread into his hair, dark and shocking against the linoleum. Lena stood over him, breathing evenly. He groaned. He was still alive. She raised the hammer again. Later, she would not remember how many times she struck him, only the rhythm, only the way the house seemed to clean closer, even every creak and groan a held breath. When it was done, she sat on the floor and waited for panic to come. It did not. The snow outside fell thicker, raising tracks, smoothing the world. Lena dragged Ivan's body down the basement stairs alone. It took hours. His weight pulled at her shoulders, bruised her knees. The house complained with every movement, but it did not betray her. The furnace hummed, the walls listened. She opened the crawl space. Digging was harder than she expected. The dirt was packed tight, cold as stone. She used a shovel from the shelf, her hands blistering, her breath fogging the low space. The earth smelled old, mineral, patient. She dug until her arms shook and her back screamed. She dug until there was a hollow long enough, deep enough. She rolled him into it. The finality of his stillness hitting her like a physical blow. For a moment she hesitated. His face looked almost peaceful. Eyes closed, mouth slack. She thought of his laugh, the way he had smiled at strangers, the way he had said, "You make me do that." Then she shoved earth over him. The sound was terrible, dirt against flesh. The scrape of the shovel, her own breathing loud in her ears. She worked until the hole was filled, until the ground was flat again, until it looked like nothing had ever been disturbed. She closed the crawl space door and leaned her forehead against it. Above her, the house sat. She cleaned the kitchen mysteriously. She washed the floor, the walls, herself. She wrapped the hammer in plastic and hid it in a box at the back of the basement shelves. She burned his clothes in the fireplace, feeding the fire slowly, carefully until there was nothing left but ash. When the RCMP came 2 days later, responding to a report from Ivan's mother that she had not heard from him, Lena was composed. "He left," she said. "We fought." He said he needed space. The officers looked around, noted the isolation, the winter. They asked questions. Lena answered calmly. There was no sign of a struggle. Nobody, no reason to hold her. In Canada, people go missing all the time. especially in winter. The house exhaled when they left. Weeks passed, then months. Winter deepened, pressing the house into the ground. Lena began to hear things at night, soft knocks from beneath the floor, a shifting like soil settling. She told herself it was the house adjusting to the cold. Old houses made noise. She knew that. But sometimes, when she stood over the kitchen floor, she felt warmth rising through the sole of her feet. Spring came late that year. When the snow finally melted, the ground around the house turned to mud, black and slick. Lena planted flowers along the foundation, her hands deep in the soil, her nails rimmed with dirt. Something smelled wrong, sweet, rotting. She pulled her hand back sharply, heart racing, but the smell faded in the open air. She packed the earth down harder, pressed the floors in the place. Inside, the knocking grew louder. At night, Lena dreamed of Ivan standing at the bottom of the basement stairs, his head tilted at an impossible angle, dirt springing from his mouth as he spoke without sound. She woke drenched in sweat, the echo of his presence lingering like a bruise. She stopped going into the basement. The house grew colder. By summer, the floor above the crawl space began to warp. Boards lifted slightly. A subtle swell no one else would notice. Lena noticed. She paced the kitchen, counting steps, listening. Sometimes, when the sun hit the right angle, she thought she saw a dark shape beneath the floor, like a shadow where no shadow should be. The house was no longer quiet. It whispered in the night, the sounds of wood and earth and memory blending together. Lena felt watched, judged, not by the world outside, but by the things beneath her feet. One night, she heard the crawl space door open. She froze in her bed, heart hammering. The sound came again, slow and deliberate. Wood against wood, a soft, wet scrap. No, she whispered. The steps came next, heavy, familiar. Lena ran. She did not make it far. The kitchen light flickered on by itself, illuminating the warped floor, the place where the house had swallowed a secret and learned to hunger. The boards split with a sound like a scream. Hands broke through, grey and slick with soil. Fingers clawing at the air. The smell of earth and decay filled the room, overwhelming and undeniable. Ivan pulled himself up, his body wrong, his eyes empty and accusing. Dirt fell from him in clumps, scattering across the floor she had scrubbed so clean. You buried me, he said, his voice the sound of soil shifting. In our house. Lena backed away until she hit the wall. The house ground around them, beams bending, walls closing in. You never left me, she said, her voice breaking for the first time. You never let me. He smiled, his teeth black with dirt. Neither did you. The floor gave away completely then, the house collapsing inward, reclaiming what it had been given. Neighbors later would say the old place must have had structural issues, that the winter had been hard on it. They would find nothing but rubbles and earth. In Canada, winter teaches houses how to keep secrets and sometimes how to make them speak. Thank you so much.